Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our December Student Advisory Council meeting. We're glad all of you could take the time out of your busy schedules to be with us for this meeting. I know some of you are on break. Some of you are cruising toward break for the end of the week here. And we hope that everyone has fun plans for the holidays and fun places to go, even if that's just around your neighborhood. We have a really full agenda for you today, so we're going to jump right in. It's going to include updates from Tony and approval of the summary from the last meeting. We have Nicole Fields on to do a mental health check-in with us. We've got Karen Dodd will come on and talk with us about the Kentucky United We Learn Council, of which several members of this group are a part. We have the updates from the Kentucky Board of Education meeting, and I think Jude is on with us, our non-voting member on the State Board of Education, and she can give you her perspective. And we'll talk a little bit about deeper learning. We'll talk a little bit about the legislative session coming up. We know that you've got work ahead still for your school safety project and some work on that. So we want to leave most of the time for that. And then Tony will finish up with communications updates and next steps. So let's jump into the agenda. Tony, I'll turn things over to you for the summary of the last meeting, and then to Nicole for mental health check-in.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. So I put a link in the chat, so hopefully you all have been able to see that. I'd just like you to take a quick look at that. Those are the meeting minutes for the November 2022 meeting minutes, or the meeting. If somebody would like to take a look at those, and let's get a motion, and then let's get approval for those minutes. I put the link back in there one more time, so there you go. Bentley, did you come on? Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I can make a motion.
Okay. A motion for approval. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, Mally, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, we're good to go. And then I will kick off to Dr. Fields.
Good morning, everybody. I will tell you that I'm in a school today, so you may hear some bells ringing. So, like normal, like on cue. Look at that. Look how good I am to this morning. So, I'm hoping that the announcements won't be long so I can get to my. I'm going to put this on mute while she's talking just for a few minutes, okay?
So the minutes that are on the screen, I saw that it was the last month's meetings. We haven't done the meetings for this month yet. So we'll make sure that everybody who's here for this meeting will be marked present. Bad timing on our part there, Dr. Field. Sorry about that.
And I'm in an elementary school, so it's like, sorry, I really do apologize. Yeah. 905, it's like.
That's right there. We can just open up for if you want to, I don't know, Commissioner, if you want to do a brief little check-in with folks and then toss to Dr. Fields. I'm not sure if you want to do that.
Well, most of the things I would update folks on are either later on the agenda or they're things that we have someone specific on to talk about. Okay. So I'm not sure if we want to move somebody up or what, or just wait a minute.
We can just wait a minute. I guess while I have you guys here, just a reminder to nominate a Teacher of the Year. We have our nomination process, sorry, I am having a hard time with words this morning. We have our application process open right now. I think that Caleb is on listening. Caleb, if you'd like to maybe share the latest map to show students where the nominations have come from. I think might be surprised to see that maybe your county has yet to have, or your school district has yet to have a teacher nominated. So we'd really, really like to get at least one nomination from each of our 171 school districts. We are picking up some steam on that, so we're really excited. And the application period will officially open after the first of the year. So the process is they have to be nominated first, then they'll get an email from Glyptis Ann Greider Jones on my staff, and then they will begin the application period.
Absolutely, Tony. I'm actually I'm getting ready to put that in the chat here, and I'll add too that this morning, after I took a look at our responses that we received overnight, the map actually changed a little bit. So the current map that I have does not reflect those changes, but it still gives the students an idea as to where we're pockets where we're missing nominations from. As of right now, Tony, we're right at actually 800, and it looks like 800 and over 880 nominations. So, of course, it would be nice to continue to see that grow, and I'm excited about it. I'm going to go ahead and paste that in the chat for everybody.
Ooh, all right. The joys of being in school.
Yeah,
So
I'll
let's
go
get
ahead
started.
and, hold on one second. I'm going to just go ahead and share that map. I see it on my screen, so I just thought I would let them see that, and those who are tuning in online as well. Again, as Caleb had mentioned, we have a couple more that have come in since then, but this was from yesterday. We will be updating it when we do our superintendent's webcast later. So if you see a district there that is not in the blue, I believe that means that we do not have a nomination from your school district or your county. So just a little bit of information for you as we get started, and I'll be happy to talk to toss to Dr. Fields now.
Thank you, Tony. So I'm going to share my screen. And thank you, everyone, for your patience this morning. Okay, so we're going to have a mindful moment with you this morning. As you know, the holiday season is here, but we cannot move forward unless we talk about some hot chocolate. Does everyone love hot chocolate? It's like one of my favorite things to have when it's cold outside. But I need you to drop in the chat which ingredient is the must-have to make the best hot chocolate. Now, I'll say for me personally, it's the whipped cream. It's the best thing to have is whipped cream. See? And I recently learned what a colleague, she puts coffee creamer, the powdered flavor, into her hot chocolate and said it makes it pretty creamy. I was like, something to try. So we have a lot of whipped cream and marshmallows. I love it. So please take time to enjoy some hot chocolate this break while we're on winter break. But I want to talk to you just for a moment because although the holiday season is here, sometimes it can be very stressful for a lot of folks. It's supposed to be joyous, but we've all have encountered it could be trauma, it could be stressful. People losing their jobs, teens are just in different spaces right now with school. Some of you may be in finals this week or like, man, I'm gonna be home, I'm not gonna see my friends. But as I was doing some research, I found that over 80% of Americans experience more stress and lower mood during the holiday season. Even with all of the movies and the lights, it's just a stressful time of year. So, which leads me to this picture of this young lady here, which I think about with a lot of our teens that are experiencing this stress that you can have during the season. A lot of it can be brought on by just anxiety, social anxiety, being in different groups that we're not used to being in. Sometimes our parents may invite us to, our guardians, our cousins, or whoever you may live with may invite you to events and you just feel like you're out of place. It just puts this extra anxiety, or you feel like you have to do something for someone. But I want you to keep in mind that I want you to take care of you first. Too often, if we don't take care of this, we can't take care of others. And that stress that comes along can really cause headaches. It can cause stomach aches. It can just cause this jack upness in your sleep. So I just want you to think about some strategies that you can do over the next 2 weeks for your mental well being. Because I don't want you to sit and just be sad. So, with that being said, here are some quick tips that can help you. Create yourself a healthy schedule. I love creating a schedule. Mine is actually color coded, and I plan it out on what I want to do during my winter break. Create you some time for peace and quiet. That is cutting off your phone, not getting on social media. It could be just relaxing to some calming music. It could be taking a walk in your neighborhood. But most importantly, I want you to sleep. This is don't set the alarm, just sleep. Our body must recharge because we have been going a lot. And then, most importantly, I want you to seek some assistance. If you are struggling and you just feel like this is heavy, I can't breathe, or I just feel some kind of way and I don't have the words to describe how I feel, tell a friend that you can trust, that they can tell an adult. Reach out to someone here in this student council that you have a relationship with, someone that can help you if you're feeling like, I just feel some kind of way. I'm feeling kind of low. So, what I want you to do is create yourself a schedule. Now, this schedule is only for 2 weeks. And I created this with my freshmen. I said, okay, you have 2 weeks. What do you want to do each day just for a mindful moment? So he said the first day he's going to read a book. Second day, he's going to listen to some music. He's going to do some mindful meditation, go for a walk. He's having a no social media day, call or going to hang out with a friend, and maybe go to bed early. But I challenge you to think about other ways that you can have some relaxation time in a mindful moment. So if you think of anything that I haven't put on here, drop it in the chat. Let's share as a community some tips that we can do to put on our schedule. So what other activities could we do to help us just kind of relax and this stressful time of year that we're in? So drop it in the chat if you think of something that it's not listed, but may be a good idea to share with our community of friends on this call. Pets. Yes. Exercise, journaling. I love it. Crafting. I love crafting. I recently just went, and one of my favorite stores, if I haven't told you this already, is the Dollar Tree. So they have a whole section, and I just, I set aside $5 to go find some creative crafts, something that I could do. Now I will say I feel some kind of way because now it's $1.25, so it's dipping into my extra treat. But they have a lot of cool crafts, and you can find some really cool ideas on YouTube, on different crafts that you create. Spending time with family, that is big. That is big. And family doesn't have to be the family that you live with. Family is who we choose as well. Some of my friends are my best friend. We have been together for over 20 years. So she's more like my sister. Watch a good movie. There are a lot of good movies out there. So be looking out for those. But most importantly, I want you to relax. Take a deep breath, enjoy the moment that you are in because we will come back to school and we will hit this ground running and life gets busy. But I just want you to just take a moment and just have some time to yourself and recharge. Bake something. I will only eat it if it's gluten free. So if anybody's cooking, please send it my way. But any other thoughts you want to share? Otherwise, that is my mindful moment for you today, giving you some tips to create yourself a schedule of something relaxing that you can do every day. Try show something out of your comfort zone. Yes, definitely something out of your comfort zone. Anybody wishing for snow? I'm kind of wishing for snow. That is my wish. We get some snow. I will do a live. And be like, look at Dr. Fields. I love snow. I really do. I really want some snow. Well, that's all I have, Tony. I'm wishing the snow. All my snow friends on here. But thank you so much, Commissioner Glass and Tony, for allowing me to come in and share a mindful moment with my friends on the call.
Thank you, Dr. Fields. We appreciate you being on, and everybody's ready for the holidays after this, I think. And I'm going to take you up on your sleep offer. I think that was meant for me too, right?
Yes.
Yes, totally.
Yes. That's like my number one is sleep.
Great. Thanks so much. So I think we've got, is Karen on to update folks on the United We Learn Council?
I am.
All right, Karen, let's turn things over to you.
All right.
Karen,
And
I had the video. If you want me to share it, just let me know. Let me know what you need
Yeah.
to do. Okay.
yeah, definitely. I was just going to say, and Dr. Fields, I can just listen to your voice. You can do like those meditation videos or audios, and that's calming for me. You got a great voice for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we're going to talk about Kentucky United We Learn, and we had our kickoff meeting just a couple weeks ago on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I want to share with you a video that Tony's team put together for us. Let's go ahead and do that first. I know we've got a couple students on here that are also going to share, so I'm not going to do a whole lot of talking because I think you'd rather hear from them. So let's go ahead and watch the video.
All right, getting that loaded. Let's see. The sound. I think that was the sound. I hope. Well, maybe not. I may have to redo that. Hold on a second. I know it's one of those things you have to hit that share microphone or it will not.
Yep.
Just didn't see. Where is that? Yeah, there it is. Okay. All right, here we go. Oh.
Students have been a central part of this effort from the beginning. If we think back about the initial data collections and empathy interviews that we went through that resulted in United We Learn, it was led by students. We had students conducting those interviews, conducting those focus groups, gathering that information. So they were there from the beginning. They're important in this work now.
So I joined the United We Learn Council because I've been involved with a lot of district level innovation and some things at the state level, and I really wanted to see where all of that came together, where our districts were able to talk about what they've been doing and share that knowledge with other people so that we can get those experiences to all Kentucky students, and also so we can build a better future.
As a student representative, like as a student in my high school, like I can see how education impacts my peers. And just like that, a lot of my peers are now becoming burnt out, and I don't want that because I know that they have like so much potential to do such amazing things.
To provide a voice from a student perspective from a small Western Kentucky school and to make a difference for all the students after me.
To provide voice and advocacy to other people and representation.
I wanted to inspire change in people that, you know, that not only that like are in the same age category as I'm in, but kids that are younger than me and kids that might not have had the same opportunities that I've had.
Applying moonshot thinking to complex challenges empowers people to look for unconventional solutions with a high probability of success. Enables teams to use fast-paced experimentation to continuously learn and improve. Assumes that everything is possible, looking beyond established ways of thinking and doing, and removes the fear of failure and helps teams focus on success. I believe that Kentucky's United We Learn initiative is our own moonshot.
They spent the last 2 days thinking about what was in the United We Learn report, the 3 big ideas of making vibrant learning experiences, bringing innovation to education, particularly around assessments and accountability, and collaboration, and working closely with people in our communities. And they developed goals within each of those and started to put some thought into how we more clearly define what those mean and how we work toward them and what it could look like.
So they're going to have to take a test they really don't understand, which kind of bothers me, but at least
We have set our sights on meeting the full spectrum of needs of every learner in every school in the Commonwealth, raising achievement for all learners and closing gaps among student groups while intentionally engaging communities in fulfilling the unlimited promise of public schools in their own backyards.
We ended with a strong sense of positivity, optimism, momentum that I think is built on the same spirit that's across the state in Kentucky. We know that there are all sorts of local examples of this work already underway and years of capacity around these efforts that's already underway. So we build upon that, and there's a real sense of purpose and hopefulness going forward.
Right. I know we have, is Justin Dunning on? I don't see him in the participant list.
He may have messaged me that let me see, sometimes he comes through as a different, they come in as a different, let me look and see. Yeah, I don't see him in yet. So
Okay.
he may have had a final this morning, but I see Bentley is there.
Yep, Bentley's here. Bentley, you want to jump on and share your thoughts about the council?
Sure. So the council was very big. I didn't realize how big it would be. It was actually like massive, but it was really nice to see all of these people like just coming together for one goal, and that although not everyone was sure of how they wanted to get the goals met, that they had a general idea of how they can work together with these 69 other people that they were around, and they could just form something. It was actually kind of fascinating to watch and be involved in.
Great, thank you, Bentley. And as Bentley said, it is a big council. We have 70 members, and those are broken out into 3 different committees. Bentley, which committee are you on?
Building a Bold New Future policy.
Bold New Future, yep. That one's going to be all about what policies may be in the way of creating more vibrant learning experiences for students, or what do we need to put into place to help make that a reality. The other thing, those 3 groups did meet over on the second day. The first day, what they did was listen to exhibitors who came in from different counties around Kentucky, and those exhibitors shared some of the things that are going on that are already related to United We Learn, so deeper learning kinds of things. And so each of the council members got to go around and see several different exhibits from those districts, and just really learn what's already happening in the state, to give them an idea of what is possible, because some of these are very innovative ideas. On the second day, the committees met in groups and talked about, as Bentley said, what are the goals that they want for their committee. This is all possible. This whole council has been made possible through a federal grant that we received. So it's really helping to fund a lot of the work that is and will be going on to make United We Learn a reality. Next, those committees will meet on a monthly basis. They put together charters on that second day to determine how they want to work together. So what goals do they want to set? Even if it's just a short-term goal, which I think is where most of them kind of landed. What do we want to accomplish within the first 6 months? And so they'll meet on a monthly basis. They've already all said that they know that they're going to want to interact with the other committees between the council meetings. So the council as a whole will meet twice a year. November was our kickoff. We'll meet again probably in April. We're still working on a date for that. And then again in the fall. So twice a year for the next 4 years, the group will meet as a whole. And in between, those councils will continue to meet. They'll continue to share with one another the things that are going on and how they're helping to make this vision a reality. Any questions or thoughts? And you all, if you want to watch the meeting, it is live streamed when it's happening. And then there's also a recording. You can go to the media portal and you can always watch portions of it. Not everything was recorded because there were a lot of breakout sessions. And like I said, they had exhibits and then they broke out into committees. And there's so much talking, a video would not, probably wouldn't get much out of a video. So those portions were not recorded, but you can watch a good part of the meeting through the media portal if you're interested. Tony, that's all I have.
All right, I think that's, I don't know if the commissioner wanted to pop in and say anything, but I think that he recapped really well in the video that we produced from our team. Students have really been at the forefront of all of this work and will remain in the forefront. So I just want to assure all of you all that, you know, Bentley and Justin are both representatives from this council on that council. But always looking for feedback and opportunities for us to do better for you. So just let us know what we can do. You all should know that our doors always open for our students, and I'm very proud of each of you and all that you've accomplished in your K-12 career so far. So, all right, thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. I believe up next, I need to, or yes, if Dr. Glass, if you can help me out, I've got a couple of screens up on my computer at the moment.
Sure. I think we've got the Board of Education overview up next.
Yes, Jude, are you on? I see her there.
I am, yes. Hi.
Good.
All right, so we had our KVE meeting on the 6th and 7th of December, so last week, if I remember correctly, and we went over a lot, but I kind of have just like a recap of some points that I thought were really interesting and what I was thinking about most. So we got a data at a glance update, which this meeting was very data heavy. We got a lot of test scores back. We were speaking on standards. We saw, I think it was like a 5-year timeline of how ACT scores are going and other Kentucky statewide test scores. And so that was really good to look at, but also seeing there was a deeper dive into them. So not only like what the scores were, but also what different groups attributed to the different scores. So that was very interesting. If Commissioner wants to say anything about that, feel free. But we also got a diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging efforts update. And this, we really went over the Kentucky report card data. So I know that was released a little bit ago, I think the beginning of October, and we talked about it a little bit here. So we really dove into like the belonging and diversity and equity efforts. There's a new program in Boone County that they're working on. So KDE is partnering with districts all over Kentucky to increase efforts for diversity, equity, and belonging. So that was very interesting. And then something I think that you guys would want to talk about is the science and social studies standards. I think I want to pass this to Commissioner because he probably knows way more than I do. But we got an update on the science and social studies standards. But something that the Commissioner said that really stuck with me during that meeting is the information that we were given is what teachers can use, but they're not limited to that. They can do things outside of there. So I'm going to pass that on to him because I think that's something that you guys really would want to hear about.
Yeah, and so thanks, Jude. And Jude does a great job representing students in the state on the Board of Education and bringing that student perspective. The science and social studies standards are being revised simultaneously, or they were revised simultaneously. That's unusual. Usually they're in cycles, so we go through one subject or content area and finish that one and then go on to the next one and go on to the next one. So they're in these cycles, and you want to spread them out and not do them every year so that teachers and students aren't having to redesign courses of study and the scope and sequence of what's going to be learned and in what order all the time. And that so the assessments can, if there are assessments attached to them, as there are with English language arts, math, and science, that the assessments can be adjusted and you don't have to do that every year. So that's typically what happens if we have these multi-year standards in place and they go in sort of a sequence. What's unusual right now is we're doing science and social studies at the same time. The reason for that is that science was due to be revised. And then you may remember last legislative session, we had a bill called the Teaching American Principles Act that got merged in together with Senate Bill 1. It was around a lot of the sort of concern that was happening around the country around this concept called critical race theory. And we didn't see introduced, or we did see introduced in Kentucky some of the same problematic bills that had been put forward in other states that would have criminalized teaching certain concepts or created penalties for classroom teachers around things like losing their license or fines, or establishing sort of hotlines where you can call in and report your teacher for allowing these sort of concepts to be discussed in class. And some of them were really broad. They included things such as, if you just talked about a concept that made students uncomfortable in class, you were violating the law. Which became really problematic because what if a student just asked a question or wondered something? So we did have some of those introduced in Kentucky. Fortunately, they didn't move forward in the legislative session. What did move forward was this Teaching American Principles Act. And so what it did, instead of outlawing things or making certain speech or conversations illegal or establishing penalties, it set forth a set of concepts, American principles that needed to be discussed in the course of a student's educational experience. And then also it established some documents that students needed to interact with. And it required that we pull up the social studies standards and revise them, weaving in these American principles and these documents through the student's course of study in a K-12 experience. And so that's why we are doing social studies and science at the same time and a little bit out of sequence of what is usual. I'm still not entirely convinced that it was necessary for us to add in these Teaching American Principles. I think that it was in response to some of the national fervor around this concept of critical race theory. I do think it's a far superior piece of legislation to what we saw passed in some other states, and not as authoritarian, sort of teetering on the edge of fascism, I would say, when you start outlawing what can be discussed and creating punishments for teachers for allowing conversations to happen in class, you really are taking pages out of authoritarian regime handbooks. So those were concerning. That's not what this does. So I think we ended up with better legislation in that sense. I do think there are still questions that should be asked around where are these decisions best made, around what should be taught and in what order. And when it happens in a political environment like the legislature and in legislative committees, you're inherently injecting a political element into these conversations. So some questions came up around, well, who's deciding the principles that are being taught, and who's deciding the documents that are going to be reviewed, and what documents are not going to be reviewed? And the answer to that is the politicians did. So that I think we should be wondering about that and the wisdom around that, but that's the way things ended up. To Jude's point, what she was saying, the law, again, to its credit, doesn't restrict what can be taught. And so it simply says these documents are the foundation, these concepts are the foundation, but you can go above and beyond that. So you can add other things. So one of the documents that got a lot of attention was Ronald Reagan's A Time for Choosing speech, which was during the Republican National Convention that nominated Barry Goldwater to run for president in the early 1960s. And so Ronald Reagan at that time was sort of a rising star politician. And he, in that speech, talks about some choices between sort of socialism and capitalism, and some of the pressures, Cold War politics that were happening at the time, sort of the U.S., Cuban, Russia, Soviet Union conflicts that were taking place. And so if you didn't understand all of those concepts, you'd have a hard time following what would become President Reagan, what he was talking about. So you need some other documents to make that make sense. And the Teaching American Principles Act allows for that. So I'll turn things back over to Jude just to have her sum up any other elements of the board meeting that she talked about. But we did process through where those documents were going to be laid in, why the social studies standards were being revised at the same time that the science standards were being made. And again, I think we ended up with a far better piece of legislation than what we saw pass in other states that took up this issue of critical race theory.
Thank you for that. See, I probably would not have explained it nearly as good as he just did. So that's why I wanted to pass it on. And then I just have two more things to say. First, I had a chance to give a report on my experience at the NASB conference, which is the National Association of State Boards of Education. And I just want to let you guys know that I bragged about this council so much to state representatives all over the nation. There were many different student voice panels and sessions in that conference. And as a student, the adults obviously want to come up to you and ask you your opinion on student voice and how to incorporate student voices into different state boards. And obviously this council is one of my favorite things to brag about when it comes to student voice here in Kentucky. So just so you guys know, state board members in Texas are very fond of you guys, and hopefully they will actually adopt their own advisory council here soon. There were a lot of talks about that, so I just wanted to let you guys know about that. And then also, we did get a United We Learn update at the board meeting, which I know we just got one right now, and we saw the same video, and that was really great. And I just wanted to highlight in the video, I don't know if you guys had a chance to read all the words and everything, but the United We Learn Council is actually led by a student, and I know Bentley's a part of that too, so just knowing that student voice is really big in that council is very important to me. And then the last thing I want to say, which will actually carry us to our next agenda item, I think, is the concept of deep learning. We discussed that for a good 30 minutes to an hour at the meeting, and how to engage students into work and the students in their work in the classroom, and how classroom work can affect kind of just everyday life and projects and passion and those types of things. So I think that's going to lead us to our next agenda item, which should be deeper learning if I read that correctly. But yeah, so that's kind of my update.
All right, thanks, Jude. Great job. And Jude, again, does a great job representing students on the Kentucky Board of Education. And she's a really valuable member of that group, and the rest of the board board members really, I think, especially enjoy getting to interact with Jude in some of the more informal parts of the meeting. So either kind of in breaks or at lunch or when we go out to dinner together, because it really gives them an opportunity to talk with her directly and ask her about her experiences as a student, which is really useful to our state board members who are making policy decisions, and ask her about how she thinks, if they make this decision or that one, how it will impact her and the experience of the student, which is for this board their primary concern. So thank you very much, Jude. You're a great representative. All right, let's talk a little bit about deep learning. This has been something that's at the center of the United We Learn effort, and I always want to make clear that it's a concept that has deep roots in Kentucky. There have been efforts around deep learning that have been in place in the state for decades. If you go back to some of the original language in the Kentucky Education Reform Act legislation in the early 1990s, there's references and goals around deep learning that are part of that. And then as we were working to implement the Kentucky Education Reform Act in the 1990s, there were efforts around deep learning that were centered on that. Now, a lot of that got derailed by a federal law called No Child Left Behind that established requirements around testing for every student in grades 3 through high school in English language arts and math, and then 3 times in science over the course of their educational career, and really sought to focus the attention and efforts in schools around sort of core academic content, English language arts, math, science, and the goal of No Child Left Behind was largely an equity focused goal. So again, it came from a place of, I would say, good intentions. There was a real concern that Black and brown and poor kids and kids with disabilities were being left behind. And that because we didn't have measures around them and there was no sort of accountability for making sure those students received an education, resources weren't being directed to them, there were low expectations for those students and what we thought they could do. So the idea behind No Child Left Behind was to establish a testing system, and then through the testing system and the public display of results, you would end up with attention being focused on kids that had traditionally not received appropriate amounts of attention and care and support, and that would change. So I think that was the spirit that No Child Left Behind came about. But in practice, what it also did was that it hyper-focused schools on subjects and experiences that could be tested. And so we also know that sort of reduces, or it does reduce, what we value or what we think is important in education down to a very narrow band of core content areas and what can be measured on a machine scored standardized test. So I think the deeper learning or the deep learning conversation is coming full circle now, because it's now raised again as a priority in Kentucky and around the country. And I think there's a growing understanding and consensus in our communities and in schools that while content such as English language arts, math, science, social studies, the content there is really important. It is essential, but it isn't enough, and it really hasn't ever been enough. And there are larger aspirations for what students want and need beyond what can be measured on a standardized assessment. So I think that's where we are. I'm going to put into the chat here an article that I wrote a couple of weeks ago that seeks to answer this question: what is deeper learning? And I've started using the term deep learning instead of deeper learning. But I think that's what I hear a lot, is people want me to define it. Well, what does that mean? And I, in this article, talk about why we haven't defined it as a department yet, because And the short answer to that is we think there's value in people in Kentucky struggling with what it means and figuring it out on their own. In other words, when it comes to defining deep learning, that presents an opportunity for deep learning, for people to really think about what it means and what it is and what it isn't, and wrestle with that. So we will come to a place where a definition becomes more clear, but that should be after we all do some thinking and reflecting and relaying our own experiences. So what I'd like to do is have you all review this article. And so I'm going to stop talking for a couple of minutes, let you read through this. And then I'd like us to come back and just hear some of your thoughts and reflections on what you read, and some examples or experiences of your own about what deeper learning is or isn't. So I'll put in the chat also under the article some kind of the prompts or some things for you to be thinking about. But for right now, why don't you go ahead and dig into the article, open it up, and start reading through it. It's not very long. Okay, let's come back together. And I'll just invite any of you to answer any of the 3 prompts that you want, either by coming on with your video and sound and talking with us, or dropping in the chat one of your reflections or reactions. So the first prompt is, what are your reactions or reflections about the article? Are the things in that resonated with you, or maybe that you disagreed with, or how would you critique it or add something to it? So there's one part. A second one you may take is, what's an example of deep learning that you've experienced in your education, either in school or outside of school? And then finally, and sometimes we learn from what not to do, what are some examples of experiences that you've had as a learner that were decidedly not deep learning, and how could that have been a better experience? So yeah, who would like to start us off?
I can start off by answering the first prompt.
Thanks, Peter.
I think my biggest takeaway from the article would have been that the deeper learning experience that you described, it seems like something you can't force, that we have to create an environment in which deeper learning can occur, and we can't just teach deeper learning, that we need to create an environment and know what it is, and create a place where students and teachers can have experiences that are categorized as deeper learning, and that you really can't force it into one form or put it into one box.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Peter. Some of the really great examples of deep learning that I've seen were, and I loved teaching these, and I still love them, and I think they're underused. It's a technique called a simulation, or it's almost like a game that you play. So like some simulations are things like international trade games, or recreations of mock trials, or recreating a congressional debate and trying to come up with a solution. So you sort of present a problem to students, you create some rules, and then you let them sort of play through and simulate the experience. So I think that's an example of how you can set some conditions, but ultimately you're relying on the learners to find their own way through the deep learning. Yeah, others?
I can go next.
Thank you.
I can do prompt number 2. Something that I've done through it. One thing I've done was in my business class, we had to use marketing, and instead of doing a regular project or something like that, we had to actually go out and find something. And one of our students was diagnosed with cancer. So we hosted a blue and white game night, and we had to market and go through places in the community and find the people to sponsor and stuff like that. So that really helped.
Excellent. Yeah, great example. And that's sort of a blend of sort of in school and outside of school experiences. And one of the things that we touched on in the article is that often these deep learning experiences don't happen within the formal school experience. Sometimes they spill over, or they're entirely outside of formal school.
I can go next.
Thanks.
So going back to what you were saying about the simulation, our school hosts a poverty simulation. So each, and it is a teacher training. So each teacher gets like a certain life situation, and you have like a certain income, so many kids, and you have to try to navigate different tasks depending on like what your status is. And it like I've volunteered to like help out with that before, and it's really interesting to see how teachers react to that. And I think that if that was something that was expanded to students as well, like that would be like a prime example of deeper learning, because it's really eye-opening. Like it was really difficult. And as well as that, I think for me, craft has been a deeper learning experience. Because I mean, not only is it challenging content, but it's also learning how to navigate living by yourself, and living with a roommate, and all of that good stuff. So I think that has also been a deeper learning experience for me.
Yeah, thank you. Great couple of great examples and points you raised. One is that I picked up on is that from the example you gave around the teacher simulation, it's a great reminder that learning is something that you do your whole life. And I know, like, when somebody said that to me when I was a high school student, I was really dejected by it. Oh, I thought there should be some kind of end to learning. But now, as a 51-year-old, I know that my learning never stops, and it never really should. And we all should keep growing and evolving and improving as human beings. We've all got things to work on. So this deep learning and the experience of learning is something that you should do your whole life, and frequently we do it through experiences that we have. So I really liked that aspect of it that you raised, and that I liked how you talked about in your experiences at school, how it's the application of knowledge, and that it's also sort of real life component to it. So those are some elements of deep learning that I think are hallmarks of it, is that it has applications outside of school. It's often things that are connected to real life, or the real experiences, and they're things that you do socially. Yeah, thank you. So I saw a hand pop up, and I think that's Sophia.
Yes. With deep learning, I don't know. This just made me think of this with like simulations and stuff like that. I feel like it's so important that when you are doing this deep learning and you're doing topics that are deeper and more sensitive to people, to be aware of how you're approaching it. Because with the simulation thing, that made me think, my middle school did this like immigration simulation, and they just did it in a very insensitive way, and it ended up just being more of a scavenger hunt, where at the end you like ate rice. Like, that is what that was. And it completely like disrespected that entire topic. And I feel like with deep learning, it's so important not to rush through things for the sake of being like, okay, we've done this, we've accomplished this, but giving every topic the time it deserves.
Sophia, thank you for raising that example. Let me ask you this: in the immigration simulation that you went through, was there an opportunity at the end of it for people to talk about their experiences and say how it could have been better, or did everybody just move on?
It was just kind of moving on. We like went outside, and then we were like taken back inside, and that was about it.
Yeah. So I think, that's an example of maybe something that, even though it was structured as a deep learning experience, or there was an effort around it, it really fell short, but it could have been improved if time had been taken for people to talk through, here's what I experienced, and here's what I learned, and here's how this could have been better. So it could have been, even though it was ultimately, what I'm hearing is sort of, it fell short of a deep learning experience. There could have been some conversations and learning that was raised around how this could have been made more meaningful, how it could have been more sort of respectful of the experiences of different cultures and immigration the concept of immigration and immigrants. And so there could have been some opportunities for learning, even in an experience that fell short, if the time had been taken to really go deep into it. Yeah, thanks, Sophia. Any others? Anyone else want to come on and just relay an experience? Otherwise, we can jump into some of the comments that are here, which have been really good too.
And
Okay,
just like others, I was just going to say, if there's anybody else that wants to just talk what they mentioned in the comments, we're always happy to hear your voice. Otherwise, we can reflect back on your comments that are listed in the chat.
Yeah, I'll read through some of those and then we'll pause again and just see if anyone wants to come on. So Bentley talked about that one kind of deep learning is PBL, or problem-based learning, project-based learning. And so this is where you're given a specific problem or project to work on. So my daughter is working through one right now. She has her science fair coming up at the end of this week. She's been working on it for several weeks. We supported her at home, but she did all the work and designing it and doing the measures and doing the data collection and creating the table. And now she's writing up her analysis. And so I can just see from her work on that's an example of deep learning, because there's multi-steps involved. She's having to think about and reflect on what she's experienced and what she's learned. She's having to justify her conclusions with evidence. She's trying to think about how she presents information in a way that's clear and effective. So there's a lot of really good parts to even the fifth grade science fair effort. If a kid goes about it in the right way, what you don't want is like the paper mache volcano, right? And the kids don't really learn anything from that. They just go on YouTube and figure out how to make one, but there's no real understanding to it. What my daughter has experienced, I think, is a good example of deep learning and a problem and project, or a project-based approach in this case. Luke has, I really like that you emphasize that deeper learning can take place outside of formal schooling. That's something that one of the writers around deep learning, a person named Jal Mehta, who is supporting us in Kentucky. Dr. Mehta is a professor at Harvard who's written a lot about deep learning. And he makes the point that often you see deep learning take place outside of formal schooling experiences, and that it happens in things such as sports or band or in clubs or in things that are, he calls them, at the periphery of school. And one of the challenges is, how do we make those things that are at the periphery of school have them have more influence on the core? What you do between the bells should be more like the things that you do outside of the bells. Let's see. Tanvi says, I related a lot to the article, especially when it mentioned how deeper learning is often not taught enough in schools during formal learning. I also think that deeper learning can occur most often outside of school. Exactly, same point again. Bentley says KYA and KUNA are good examples as well. So Bentley, you may want to talk about that. Thanks for raising that. Jude says, I like how the article mentioned that deeper learning is like exploration, not expectation. And I've used this line several times, and I attribute it to a longevity scientist at Harvard named David Sinclair. I think it changes the perspective of anything that you're investigating, because when you start out with an expectation, you're sort of imposing on something. Here's what I think is going to happen. And that's useful. It's useful to sort of make a guess or a hypothesis about what you think is going to happen. But sometimes we're also in a state of exploration. We don't know. We have an idea, but we just want to go and find out. We want to explore. And so I think that shifting that mindset from expectation to exploration can be useful as well. It's a different way of approaching this issue. So let's see. VJ says, many examples of deep learning for me originate from my soccer team. I've learned many social lessons such as teamwork and patience, but I also have learned lessons which may relate to science and math, just understanding the physics of the ball, anticipating how others on the team play has allowed me to be a better player on and off the field. So another great example of how those things outside of school can be deep learning and create lifelong lessons for us that often are really maybe more important than just focusing on the content. Bentley's agreeing with Jude here. True learning means charting one's own path. Jude also says, one of my deep learning experience just happened last year. I had a school project or career exploration. I needed to interview a professional of my choice. I was able to interview a travel nurse and learn more about the profession, and also able to engage in a meaningful conversation. So that's a great example of deep learning. And part of that, I think, Jude, is that you got to decide the sort of path of that. While somebody or your teacher may have established sort of, here's the project or problem that I want you working on, you had some agency, meaning you got to make some decisions about what questions to ask, where you go next, how far you want to go, and it sort of shaped its own way based on your curiosity and what you wanted to learn. Sophia says, interviews with people in the field you want to study have happened a lot in my school with career pathways, and they've been very helpful. So Sophia agreeing with Jude there. Hunter says, we did a bit of deep learning a few years ago, similar to what Knox was speaking of. We did a program in Lexington where we would completely simulate life with kids, a job, and even what it was like to go bankrupt. So, one of the purposes of a simulation is to create empathy so that you understand some of what another person is feeling and thinking and experiencing, so that you have a better understanding of that, and it helps you grow as a person. So going bankrupt is maybe something that you get to experience in a simulation as a student, and it helps you avoid going through that experience as an adult later. We would hope that. Luke says, would you say that deeper learning is a synonym or what leads to critical thinking skills? I think it would be better to put deeper learning's meaning into context for me. Yeah. Luke's asking a great question here. And I think, again, this is something that I don't need to say, here's the definitive answer on that. But it's something that we can debate and discuss, and evolve, and that thinking can evolve. I think deep learning probably involves the application of these kinds of adaptive skills like critical thinking. So critical thinking for me is that you presented with information, you review that information and decide what of this information can I believe? Why do I trust it? How can I use the information? Is the source biased or reliable? Can I apply the information to this context? Does it make sense? Is it logical? So that's kind of a critical reading of something, is that you're critically evaluating information and then deciding the value or context of the information that you're receiving. So I think part of deeper learning is applying a skill like critical thinking can be one way that it takes root. Bentley says, clarification, the KYA is the Kentucky Youth Assembly, a mock General Assembly. Great example, Bentley. That's a good simulation, and we talked about simulations earlier. Kentucky United Nations Assembly, again, a simulation. So those are two great examples. And I talked some in the article that there are different forms of deep learning that can take place. So problem and project-based work is one, like my daughter's science fair project that she's working on. Something that's smaller in scale might be a problem that's assigned to students in a classroom. So you've only got 50 minutes. You need to solve the problem in the 50 minutes and work on that. So those are examples of problem and project-based deep learning. These examples that Bentley's put forth here and what others have raised around the poverty simulation or the immigration simulation, those are simulation exercises. So it's kind of like you establish some conditions or rules around something, and then you want students to experience something so that they have a frame of reference. Deep learning can also take place in, some of you may have experienced a teaching technique called Socratic method, where in Socratic method, all the teacher does is ask questions, and they just keep asking questions and going deeper with the questions. So the teacher really isn't standing up and telling you anything. They just keep asking questions and making you wonder things and want to learn more on your own. And we have deep learning that can take place. Doesn't always have to be in a class, or it doesn't have to always have to be in a group. Sometimes we experience deep learning on our own when we're passionate about learning something, and you have to go deep and really deeply understand and learn something on your own. So there have been a couple of examples that I've had on that. Probably about 15 years ago, my wife Sarah and I became really interested in sort of financial planning and management. We didn't know a lot about that, but we figured it out. And it's something that she and I worked on, just the two of us, and worked through that. So that's an example of deep learning that we went through. And then you may have seen from the quote that I had in here, this question around sort of longevity and long-term physical health. That's something that I'm learning about right now. So it's something that I'm going through on my own as well. So deep learning can take place individually, or it can take place as part of a group. Brian's noting that KYA and KUNA are for middle school students only. Anastasia talks about how they give students insight into how legislation works. So lots of love for the Youth Assembly and the United Nations simulation. Speech and debate, also great. Any kind of, I think, performance-based activity. So we haven't talked a lot about that, but anytime you have to stand and deliver something, that can definitely be a deep learning activity because it has that performance-based outcome. So if you are being asked to stand and deliver a presentation or a speech, or perform a piece of music, or sing, or something like that, that is often a deep learning activity. And what makes it deep is the instant accountability you get from being evaluated by everyone who's watching you. So that makes it a deep, I think can make it a deep learning activity or experience, because you really want to understand it, perform well and do well because of that sort of public performance related to it. So that can be an aspect of deep learning. All great points that have been raised in the chat here. Nyla says I'm in law and justice when I perform mock trials and go into that experience of deeper learning. So, I mean, with a mock trial, you're getting into a lot of the content too, right? You have to understand the concepts. You have to understand logic. You have to understand the law. So you're getting the content. And then you're also applying a bunch of other skills. You're needing to read and write. You're needing to speak. You're needing to critically evaluate information. You need to be logical. So there's a whole host of skills that you're being required to use in like a mock trial or a simulation that will pay dividends, because that's what life is like. Simulation is to try and recreate some of the experiences of life. And so you get some practice doing those kinds of things before you actually have to go out and do it. And Sophia says some of the best conversations that I had in school were Socratics that weren't structured or led by a teacher, where students just got to talk about the material we read and led that conversation into what they thought was interesting to explore. I think having the authority over what you're learning and its path gives it more depth. That's a great ending quote for us, which really gets to this concept of student agency. So student agency means that the student has some or all of the control over where the learning goes next. So oftentimes, we had that example earlier around the immigration simulation and how that kind of went wrong. A good next step that would have made that better and perhaps improved it for the students the next year is to give the students that went through that agency and the opportunity to talk about what went right and wrong, what they learned and didn't learn, how maybe they were offended by some of the experiences that they went through, or they thought that it was disrespectful to the experiences that immigrants had, or maybe dismissive of the experiences that immigrants have and the struggles that they have. Allowing the students to choose that conversation and to have that conversation gives the student power, or it gives the student agency, which makes the learning deeper and more meaningful. Tony, I'm going to stop here and turn things back over to you. I need to run over to the Principal Advisory Committee, but I'll try and make it back here to close up with all of you. Thanks so much for this great conversation. Appreciate it.
Sounds good. I think that we have the safety project next. So I think Dr. Brewer, are you on?
I am. Were we going to do the legislative update?
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I've got Brian first, and then I have, sorry, I apologize. I skipped over Brian. Brian, are you ready?
Programs. Sure, sorry, hang on. Listen to contract review at the same time here.
It's well.
All right. So, lots happening in the legislative world. We're a month past the election and about a month away from the start of the session. So we'll just kind of run through things, and if there's questions or comments you want to make, we'll get to those at the end. So post-election, Republicans expanded their supermajority in both chambers. So they will have a 80-20 split in the House. So they'll control 80 of the 100 seats. The best I can tell, this is the biggest supermajority since at least the early 90s. I think in 92 or so, Democrats had a 75-25 split. So pretty significant to see them get to 80 seats. Over in the Senate, they will start with, I think, a 31-6 split. Because there'll be one open seat with Morgan McGarvey from Louisville headed to Congress. Then there'll also be a second seat opening as Senator Alvarado heads to Tennessee to lead their Department of Public Health. So when it's all said and done, we'll have, I think, 21 new faces in the House, which is about on par with what we would expect. So every 2 years, the entire House gets reelected, and we typically see 25% turnover. Over in the Senate, we'll have 8 new faces. That's also about 21% turnover. That's pretty high for the Senate. Typically, we don't see that much turnover in the Senate. They have longer terms, and it's just a little more stable. But with some retirements and other things, yeah, so it'll change up the makeup of the Senate a little bit. We'll see how it goes. We'll know more as the session gets rolling. So we roll right out of one election and straight into the next. I'm sure you all have seen that there's a very crowded Republican field for the gubernatorial nomination. So in addition to the governor's race, all of the other constitutional offices will be elected next fall. Those will start seeing folks file to run for those offices as well. You may have seen some folks jumping in the race for attorney general, treasurer, things like that. So all of those will have primaries on May 16th. So those of you that will turn 18 before then, please make sure you're registered to vote and participate in that. And then the general election will come up on November 7th. So again, some of you that may not turn 18 in time for the primaries, if you turn 18 after May 16th, be sure to register before the November general election. All right, so on to some state house changes. So each house has a leadership slate. So I'm sure you're familiar with the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. Those are the top 2 positions. But then there's a few other leadership roles within each chamber that the majority party fills. Additionally, there are a few leadership roles for the minority party. So for the majority party leadership spots, we're only going to see one change in either house. So the Senate stays exactly the same. Over in the House, Jason Nemes from the Louisville area will replace the retiring Chad McCoy as majority whip. So that's the only leadership change we have in either house. Now, below that kind of official leadership level, you have chairs of various committees, right? So this is the next level of leadership, even though it's not really technically referred to as leadership. So the committees and there's a lot of different committees, but the ones we interact with the most, 2 are A&R, Appropriations and Revenue. They are the ones that eventually will set the budget. And so next session's a budget session, and they'll set the budget then. Those 2 chairs will not change. The education chairs, however, are changing in both houses. So in the House, we have a retirement. Regina Huff decided to not run again, so that seat was open. That will be filled by Representative James Tipton. He is currently serving as the Budget Review Sub-Chair for Education. He's one of the biggest champions for education in either chamber, so we're very excited to see him move up. Over in the Senate, we have just a change. The current chair, Senator Wise, is moving over to be chair of Economic Development, Tourism, and Labor. He will be replaced on education by Senator West. Again, currently serves as Budget Review Sub-Chair for Education. So not a stranger at all. Excited to work with him in this new role. It's also worth noting that both Representative Tipton and Senator West were the two primary sponsors of the Read to Succeed legislation from last session. So that finally got across the finish line, got a very sizable appropriation in the budget. And they were the primary sponsors of that. So again, just real excited to see them in these new roles and to start working with them as the education chairs. So their two budget review sub-chairs will be filled by Representative Banta in the House. She's a former educator. And over in the Senate, it will be Senator-elect Matt Dineen, so a new face in the Senate. Although he has actually been attending most of the interim committee meetings because he did not have a general election opponent. So after the May primary, he knew that he would become Senator-elect. So he's been attending a lot of the meetings, so he should hit the ground more up to speed than some others that haven't had that opportunity. And then I mentioned that Senator Wise will be chair of economic development over in the Senate. Over in the House, that will be Representative Weber. So that's the chairs that we probably work the most with. So it'll be interesting to see what the education chairs decide to do on various issues. They get to set the agendas for their committees. They get to decide what bills get heard during the session. So very important folks in our world. So in terms of the 23 session, it starts January 3rd. They'll gavel in. They'll have a week in Frankfurt where they'll officially set all of the leadership slate. They can pass legislation that first week, although it's pretty unusual to see them pass a bill that quickly. Although if there's a high priority bill that they want to get done, it is possible to do it that first week. That they'll gavel out at the end of that week and go on a break and come back February 7th and then run through March 30th. So this is a so-called short session. So every 2 years we have 60-day sessions where they set the biennial budget. This is the off-year session, so it's 30 legislative days. Calendar-wise, it's only a couple of weeks shorter because of that big break in January. So typically originally these were designed to be kind of filler sessions, right, where they would come in and do cleanup legislation, make some small changes. Over time, they've morphed into essentially just regular sessions minus the budget. And even then, they've cracked open the budget from time to time to make small changes. We've heard a few of them talk about wanting to get back to the original intent and scale it back. We'll see if they can hold to that. I tend to think that they get tempted once they get into session, and it's hard to not do all of the things. So we'll see. But like I said, it'll run March 30th is sine die. That's the final day of the session. We'll see what happens. In terms of priorities, teacher recruitment and retention's high on the list. So I think we'll see some action on things like revising the existing teacher scholarship and maybe something with teacher apprenticeships. You may have heard that Tennessee has piloted that model. And so we're looking to bring that to Kentucky. And I say we, I mean kind of the collective we as all the stakeholders. So KDE, CPE, members of the General Assembly are all real interested in seeing teacher apprenticeships get going in Kentucky. So won't be surprised if we see some legislation related to that. There was talk early in the summer following the Uvalde shooting about some sort of school safety legislation. I don't know what we'll see in that regard. That talk has kind of cooled off in the last few months. So we'll see if there's a proposal to do something with that. I think those are some of the top priorities. Are there any questions, comments? I'm very quiet this morning.
Yeah, they were asking, there was a couple that were asking about just getting, they really did want to have a preview. So I think that they're just maybe absorbing what they've heard. And students, do you have any questions about any, I know last session there was some discussions on some other things. Certainly I see Dr. Brewer coming on too. I know that safety's been discussed and we'll get to that item on the agenda here shortly, but I just wanted to see if anybody had anything else that they wanted to add in terms of maybe something that they would like to see or what you hope will be a priority for our General Assembly this coming session. And it looks like Mally put a comment in there, Brian. How can they view the bills for this session? Is there a link that they could go to and maybe keep track of that?
Yeah, let me post it for you. Hang on. So everything is posted on the website for the LRC. Stuff popping here. So there's the link to the LRC website where the bills get posted. So they're usually posted every evening. It's updated every evening at some point. So it's not real time per se, but you can follow along pretty well there. During the short sessions, we'll probably see, I'm going to say 700 bills filed. During a budget session, we see closer to 1,200 probably. So a lot of bills get filed. So I'll run through the process real quick. So when a bill gets filed, it starts in one chamber, so either the House or Senate, and it goes to what's called the Committee on Committees. That's the group of legislators that decide where, if at all, to assign, what committee to assign it to. So say Dr. Brewer files a bill regarding the teacher scholarship in the House. It would go to the Committee on Committees. They would then assign it to, say, the Education Committee. If they decide not to assign it, it's essentially dead on arrival. If it gets assigned to a committee, then that committee chair, so in this case, Chair Tipton, would decide whether or not to give that bill a hearing in his chamber or in his committee. If it gets a hearing and gets a vote and it gets voted out of committee, it would then go to the House floor. The majority leader would have to decide to call it for a vote. That typically happens after they have closed door caucus meetings where they talk about different bills. They would see if they have the votes for it to pass. We typically don't see a bill get called for a floor vote unless they know that they have the votes for it to pass. If it gets a floor vote and it passes, it then goes over to the next chamber to start the process all over again. So it goes over to the House. They decide whether or not to assign it to a committee. If it gets a vote in that committee, it would go to the floor of that chamber. If it gets a vote in that chamber, assuming that there were no changes to the bill, it would then go to the governor for action. The governor can do one of three things. He can sign the bill into law, he can allow the bill to become law without his signature, or he can veto the bill. If he vetoes the bill, the two chambers respectively can override the veto with a simple majority vote in each chamber. He only can veto a bill outright or not at all, except for the budget bill, where he has line item veto power. And again, they can override the line item vetoes with a simple majority vote on each one. It's a lot to go through. That's the really quick high version. There's some more nuance to it when they start making changes to bills.
Chat, Brian, there's a document from LRC, The Road to Passage, and has a nice
yeah, I've got a copy of that.
set of graphics. So
yeah,
I love the little
the infographic. So that's what happens. Like I said, we'll see, hundreds and hundreds of bills get filed. A lot of them never even get assigned to a committee, so they're dead on arrival. You can follow along, like I said, on that LRC page. I'll also be tracking bills through, I can make a little spreadsheet. So I'm happy to share that. If you're ever interested, just reach out.
Yeah, just add another thing. Our lawmakers, your senator and your representative really like to see students, and they like to recognize student work as well. So if there's anything that, we can do to help elevate that, or any kind of project based, I know that some of you are involved in CTE projects, and February is going to be, or is CTE month. And so there's going to be a big display and showcase of talent at the Capitol in February. So some of you may be invited to present there. It's really a great opportunity for our lawmakers to kind of see you in action in your schools. So, I just know every time that we have something, or we just ran into one of our newest lawmakers up in Northern Kentucky on Friday at one of our schools when we were giving away a classified staff award. And he mentioned how much he really enjoys coming into schools and seeing kids in action. So just wanted to put that out there for you and to always let us know how we can help you. And Brian's around to always connect, try to connect you or try to get you some additional or students at your school or school's recognition. We always like to see that during the session. Anybody have any questions?
So I'm also putting in 2 links if you're ever really interested and you want to watch committee meetings or chamber sessions happen. They're the 2 links. So KET streams most committee meetings as well as chambers during the session. If they're not doing it, you can usually find it on LRC's YouTube channel, which is right below it. They go into session Monday through Thursday at 4. And at usually 9 or 10 on Fridays. So always an exciting time. So follow along in real time, folks. If you're lucky, you might even catch a glimpse of me in the back row. So I usually try to hide from the cameras though.
It never fails. Every time I try to avoid, I somehow get a side angle, and then it's like worse than just being right there in front. So I don't know what I have yet to figure out how to dodge those side cameras. So. Well, thank you, Brian, so much. Mally, I know he said he's very appreciative. So, again, students, when we do the exit form, if there's something that comes up, Brian's always available. Dr. Brewer's available. Anything with policy, things that are going on, within the agency, things that we're asking for, advocating for, we're always happy to share that with you all. All right, up next is Dr. Brewer. I think she put some links in the chat, so I'll let her take over.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony. All right. So we've reached the official first draft stage. So congratulations to all of you. All of your hard work has paid off, as I said in my email yesterday. So excellent job. I know we started this journey in May. Hard to believe that it's now December. So I think the best plan, which will be not terribly entertaining for those viewing the meeting from home, but we're going to read the draft. So I put an updated version. I did find a typo. So the one in the chat is the most updated version. So if you could take a few minutes to read through the current draft, I put in our questions that we've used throughout this process to sort of guide our review. So be thinking through those prompts as you're reading, and also pay special attention to the sort of call out boxes. So we have some quotes that have been pulled out. We have our recommendations in separate boxes. So pay very close attention there to make sure that what is being highlighted is what you want highlighted. So we'll take a few minutes to read through the draft, and then we'll come back together and talk about next steps and what we want to change. So we do, Megan, need to leave the feed on. So we will all be intently reading in silence, and those watching from home can I guess imagine
Listen
what
to
it would
us
be like
waiting
to
in
be here.
science. Yeah.
All right, go
Need to
ahead
find
and-
some soft music that's not
That's right.
that we can play. I'll have to put that on my schedule for next meeting.
And let me know if you have any trouble accessing that link.
I must say, this is far more comprehensive than I thought we had made it.
I know, you guys are impressive. So there you go. Pat on the back for everyone. All right. I think most everyone has had a chance to read the document. So let's start with initial reaction. So does anyone want to share sort of your initial thoughts?
I can start.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Peter.
The draft upon the formatting was very nice. Props to whoever did the formatting for the pictures and everything. Makes everything clear and concise and highlights the ideas that we'd like to share. I don't know how much review needs to be done for the whole council for all of the opinions we put forth. Some of them may seem that they might not coincide with legislature's immediate predispositions. But overall, I think that the draft is clear in our recommendations, and that if we stick by it, then we're really well set.
Thank you. And just a side note, before we hear from others, as I said in the email last night, this document is not accessible, not even close. So that'll be the next step. So once we confirm that you all are comfortable with the content, as well as what has been sort of pulled out to highlight, then we'll work with Tony's team to get it accessible. I actually used Canva, which is a no-no. So it is definitely not accessible, but I wanted you to be able to kind of look at what our aspirational goal is for how the document will look, and then we'll work on getting it formatted. So any other thoughts?
Just to be clear, do you mean accessible as in like viewing the document or as in the content within it?
So accessible as in viewing the document. So if someone were using a reader, it would not flow correctly. The images don't have alt text. I haven't checked the color contrast, any of those things yet. So really, we're just sort of looking at kind of the proposed format. And then Tony actually has someone on her team who is an accessibility expert. And so we'll work with him to make sure that it is appropriately accessible. So right now, that's why I asked you to not share it or post it anywhere. This is really just a draft for our review. Any other thoughts?
I can go. I think it looks really great starting out. I really like, I read the after incident, which is my section. I love the emphasis on the grade forgiveness and that the world is still a good place with just a few bad people in it. My only concern, and it's more of a minor concern, it's I think that last sentence on the after the incident talking about a drill. And so this will also allow time for students to reach out for help if they feel they are not properly prepared. Should we be maybe a little bit more specific in that language? Like, are students being able to opt out of the drill if they don't feel they are properly prepared? Is there like a certain criteria? Like, do they have to have a psychological evaluation to opt out? I just feel like maybe we could be a little bit more specific.
Excellent. Yes. Any other comments?
I'm actually kind of curious about that. So are we kind of doing this like this is just recommendations and we're actually going to figure out how we're doing it later on, kind of like United We Learn, or is this just we want to do both at the same time?
So this will be separate from United We Learn. So this is really potentially going to be, oh, I see. Okay, so you're, sorry. Sorry, Bentley. Same general format. Got it. So we need to talk about how you want to proceed with dissemination on this. So Brian certainly will have thoughts on that. Christina, I believe, is on the call and can speak as well to sort of what we want to do. A lot, and we talked about this during our last few meetings, a lot of what you've proposed really won't require legislative action. So that's not really necessarily the target audience. I think we originally thought perhaps that it would be, but really we might want to have the document more widely disseminated to school and district leaders, and then kind of targeted presentations to key constituents who may have the authority to implement some of these changes at their schools. So local school boards, things like that. But we can talk through kind of how you want to push this out. Certainly, I think it would be appropriate to try to get on the agenda for a presentation to one of the committees, just to share the work of the council and the recommendations from the students. But that will really be up to you all decide kind of how you want to go about sharing this. Brian, Christina, any thoughts that you have?
I think, how shall I say this? I'm a little dated by the meeting that I just came out of, which was the Government Contracts Review Committee. And I think that it was clear from some of the comments from the legislators that, and this is just one committee, it's not the full legislative body, but that there are some legislators who really don't think that mental health is a real issue that schools should be addressing. So that's just some of the legislators, not all of them. I think there are obviously a lot of them were very supportive of this, you know, and when they passed the School Safety and Resiliency Act, because we see so much in there around psychological safety and mental health. So I just say that to not let you, I don't want you to be discouraged if you do get pushback, because I feel like some of the folks, this is my personal opinion based on some of my recent experiences with going before this committee around our work related to trauma-informed practices and mental health supports and that sort of thing, that not to let that discourage you from sharing your thoughts and pursuing this work, because I think there are others that are very receptive to this, and some of the folks who are not receptive may be in a vocal minority. So that's all I will say about that. But I think you all have put forth some very positive and practical recommendations. There might be some places to be a little bit more specific about what you want to see, that, you know, could be perhaps done even in follow-up, like as you're doing some, you know, discussions in the community or with different stakeholders, where you could provide some more specific examples of what you articulate here in this brief. But that's my impression. You all have done a really excellent job of putting together some very thoughtful recommendations around this issue.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina, and thanks for all of your guidance throughout this process. I do want to emphasize that the adults in the room, virtual room, did not write this document. So I did compile it for you into this format. I did not write a single word. So that was really important to us. So every single word that is in that document, one of you contributed. So I played role of editor and splice it together for continuity, but I did not write this. And neither did Christina, and neither did Brian. So we were here to guide you. So these are your words, and that was really important to us. So you all should be very proud of, as Bentley said, it is a dense document. You guys have done a lot of work, done a lot of important research. So excellent job, guys. So you should be very proud. Brian, I think is probably double booked this morning. Brian, are you on still? There you go. Okay. Thoughts on the best sort of plan to share the document once we get those edits in place that have been suggested?
We can probably have one of the folks send it to co-chairs West and Tipton as a starting point. So one of them might be interested in having them present in committee probably in February. So.
Yeah, I was just going to mention to you all, our next meeting is actually in person in Frankfurt. So maybe they could do a mock presentation or something like that. So just keep that in mind. We can book a little bit additional time and kind of, get them ready.
Tony, when is that meeting, Tony?
It is on January 24th.
We could also invite, Chair Tipton or someone to come to the meeting and kind of have a presentation there. That actually might be the best idea.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
Raisins,
we'll have, yeah, that'd be great. What do you all think about that?
That would be awesome.
Yeah,
that sounds very good.
Inviting the co-chairs, the chairs of each education committee, Senate and House. Sure.
Invite them all. Okay, so here's what I need from you. So to the email, in response to the email I sent last night, let me know your feedback, recommended changes. So that I can't remember who, it wasn't Peter, who was the person who recommended the change in that last paragraph around opting out.
It was me.
Okay, so if you can send me your recommended changes, we will make those edits to the content, and then we'll work on the accessibility. So I will work with Tony's team to make sure that the document can be posted and shared. So why don't we give ourselves a New Year's deadline. So let's try for maybe the second week of January. How about we do this? If you have changes to the actual text, if you can get that to us soon. So that would be, I know that you guys are busy with finals, but if you can try to get it to us soon so that we can be working on the formatting. Is it unreasonable to have you send it by Friday? It should only be a handful of sentences, I think, that we'll need to change. But if you can send that in an email rather than adding it to the Google Doc. Now that it's in this format, let's start just sending via email so that we don't lose track of kind of the revisions. Oh, Brian, I think you're unmuted. Is that Maddie talking to you? Okay. She sounds very sweet.
Yeah, she was sick yesterday, so she can't go to daycare. So
okay.
You're yeah, but she just wandered in, so.
No, that's perfect. Okay, I'm gonna mute you though. Okay, sorry. Not that we don't want to talk to Maddie, but if you can email me those changes, so hopefully by Friday we can have the content sort of firmed up. Okay, and then that way between now and let's say that we'll get a draft to you all that is accessible and able to kind of be in a more final format, hopefully by maybe January 6th. So we can work on that. That'll give us some time to read through it, make sure everyone is comfortable with it. And then we can talk about what it would look like to prep for an in-person presentation on the 23rd of January. So excellent job, everyone. Email me your thoughts. But it's really looking great. So congrats. There was one other thing I was going to say. Oh, I think if you are interested in being a formal presenter, maybe let Tony know so that she can provide some support to you on kind of what that would look like. And then we can talk through the content via email since we won't meet again as a full group before that January meeting. We'll see if Brian can get them, those legislators committed to coming. But either way, we probably should still plan on at least doing a dress rehearsal of what that presentation would look like in January. So if you're interested in being one of the primary speakers, let Tony know. But overall, great job.
Yeah, and just a quick note, you can send me an email. Also, make sure you include Glyptis and Grider Jones, who I know you guys get a lot of emails from. Just a short note that I'm going to be going out on medical leave starting on Thursday, and so I'll be out for a couple of weeks. Everything is fine. I'll be okay. I just, in case I don't get a response to you quickly, you can always reach out to Glyptis Ann or Audrey or any of the communications team, and we'll make sure that we can get with Meredith and Brian and make sure we're in good shape for the 24th. But I do expect to be back in time for the 24th meeting, so looking forward to that.
So Friday for content changes, and then everyone have a wonderful winter break. And then we will try to get you a draft that first week of January. Thanks, everyone. Great job.
Great. So I have some exciting news. I just got an updated map showing the school districts that have a Teacher of the Year nominated. And it looks like we're down to about 24. So I wanted to share that with you. So the districts that are not shaded in blue are the ones that do not have a current teacher nominated for Teacher of the Year. So if any of you all are in these districts or you know somebody that is worthy of a nomination, we ask for you to nominate. I see that the Kentucky School for the Deaf and Kentucky School for the Blind are included in that. So any teachers at those two schools that you all might work with or are aware of, they are also eligible for this Teacher of the Year award. In fact, we actually had a finalist from KSD this year. And so you'll see there. So we're in really good shape so far, but we'd love to see 100%. So again, reach out, let people know. We can make sure in our follow-up exit slip that we have the link for nominations. It does take literally a minute to nominate. So just wanted to share that update with you. I just got that map. So you get to see it before your superintendents do, because I'll be sharing it with them at 2 o'clock as well. And I think that is it. I know it's a little bit, we don't have as a lot of student opportunity things to mention to you. I know that we keep that flowing to you all pretty regularly. I just really want to emphasize what Dr. Fields had said at the beginning of this meeting, is to really take some time for yourself over winter break. It's really important to, just kind of re-nourish yourself and get ready for the next semester. It's a great time of the year to do things that you enjoy. Once you get the comments to Dr. Brewer, of course, and then just be in contact with us if there's anything that we can do for you. And we look forward to seeing you in January. And I think that's all we have for today. So you guys get about a half hour of your time back.